Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for High Velocity Radio.
Welcome to Coach the Coach, helping business coaches deliver more impact in less time. If you're a business coach and want to help more people make more money and own your backyard, go to brxteam.com. We are broadcasting live on the High Velocity Radio Show and on the Business Radio X network. Lee, this is going to be a fantastic segment. Please join me in welcoming to the broadcast co-author of The Coaching Effect, Mr. Bill Eckstrom. How are you, man?
I am great. How are you, gentlemen?
We are doing well. Well, Bill, before we get too far into things, can you talk about the EcSell Institute? How are you serving folks?
Oh, well, thank you. Boy, wow, what a wonderful way to lead into a question, right? Or an interview, anyway. The EcSell Institute is a research-based organization that studies the impact of coaching on the performance of teams. Primarily, our work is done in sales departments of organizations, and we help organizations, managers become better coaches is what we do. And we monitor, track, and we can actually measure coaching effectiveness within organizations. So in a nutshell, that's what we do.
So you believe in measuring things rather than going with gut feelings. I believe in both. I really do. But I use data and measurements to affirm perhaps what I feel. And in a lot of cases, it disaffirms what I feel. So now, how do you define the difference between managing and coaching?
Wow, really good question again. Managing is about measuring inputs in order to get predictable outcomes. And think about Ford's assembly line. You see, the science and study of management came about in the industrial era in our country. And so you really don't have to think much further than assembly lines, using that as an example. Coaching, on the other hand, is about everything that involves improving performance. So while managing is about predictable inputs and outcomes, coaching is about things to grow and sustain performance. So for coaching to happen, I've never known a great coach that wasn't great at identifying and acquiring the best talent. I've never known a great coach that wasn't great at strategy, at planning, at motivation. So coaching does a better job of encompassing everything it takes, not just to create performance, but to grow and sustain it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, do you find that that in today's world, that coaching or being coached or having a coach is kind of a must-have for managers today and for leaders, as opposed to maybe a nice to have or only for the elite maybe a few years ago?
The short answer to that question is yes. I think the fastest growing field in coaching is executive coaching, which that's not what we do, but in just terms of scale, that's a huge growth industry. Coaching, too often, everybody thinks it applies to just frontline workers, when the reality is the performance of a team, and we talk about this in the book quite a bit, the performance of a team is always a reflection of how that team is coached. And that starts at the top. So I have a coach. We recommend everybody should have somebody in their life to help them to really challenge the way they view the world, challenge the way they view their teams, challenge the way they view their businesses, so on and so forth. So absolutely, everybody should have somebody in that realm.
So now, is that because of the fact that today in the internet world that we live in, that information is coming at us fast and furious, and that it's just very difficult for an individual to keep track of all of that. Plus, all the stimulus and distractions, it's hard to stay on track and focus, that people need somebody to kind of watch their back a little bit?
I'm thinking about that. I think those are all, yes, it's never a single thing. I think there are a lot of things, but certainly those are items. The others, we have a tendency in coaching roles, which we'll use that term as opposed to leadership. Sometimes I use it synonymously, but we need to be challenged in everything we do. See, we're busy running a business, working on the business, working in the business in most cases. And we hear all the time from, especially with senior leaders, when it comes to, we'll ask them sometimes, we'll say, do you think you're a finished product? Well, of course they don't. Nobody would answer that question that they feel like they're a finished product. But when you dig and probe further about what do they do to educate themselves, to challenge the way they think, to challenge their behaviors, chances are they haven't done much of anything outside of reading an article out of the Wall Street Journal or Forbes or something like that.
So you find for some people, there's a lack of that kind of quality of lifelong learner, that they think that, hey, I've got enough information, I can now just do what I've done?
That's a good way to put it, but yes, I think there is a lot of that. Or worse yet, I won't say worse yet, but equally as bad is their learning and growth, their development comes only within their respective industry. And that's really, really limiting.
So let's talk about your work and your program. So how do you serve, you work with companies and you work with the management team typically?
Yes, that's all we work with is the leadership team within organizations. And really, I think simplistically, the best way to describe it is that we follow a 4-step coaching process, and that involves measurement, where we go in and measure the actual effectiveness, the coaching effectiveness of their leadership teams. And we can actually give them a numeric number, 1 through 100. We educate and develop their people. So that would be step number 2. Step number 3 is there's an implementation platform and process and program, because we know people don't just sit in a training session and come out and change their habits and behaviors. They just don't. It's that simple. So there has to be some sort of accountability partners and programming involved. And then the last step involves data. We analyze, we go back and measure all kinds of things. We measure their behaviors, we measure their activities, and we correlate all that back to team performance and growth. So we put a lot of data together to help people understand how their actions and behaviors impact those around them.
Now, what's the pain the organization's having where they decide, you know what, it's time to call the EcSell folks?
You're kind to ask. Funny, a lot of people think it's organizations that find themselves in trouble. They're not growing. That's not it. We get very few of those calls, actually. And in the book, we even talk about that. The ones who we end up working the most with are people that are growing and they're afraid of it slowing down. That's where we get our most of our clients and our partners or organizations follow that model. They like it, and their leaders are afraid that it might slow down. And while things are well, they better make investments again.
And that's probably a good fit for you in terms of people that you can work with, because they already have the mindset of they just want to keep sharpening the saw and being better. And
you said something really, really key there, Lee, which is mindset. that is spot on. It's all about the mindset of those leaders. That's right.
Now, what's your backstory? How did you get into this line of work? Have you always been a coach?
Not well. I suppose in roundabout ways, yes. If you include everything from my kids' athletics to, I've always done a lot of mentoring with youth here in Nebraska. But I spent most of my career in the sales and then sales leadership arena. And then I was terminated from a job that really inspired me then following that to start this organization, which I did 10 years ago.
And then now you're helping kind of managers get the most out of their people through coaching?
Yeah. When you think about it, using, again, sales departments as an example, people want to grow sales. They typically make an investment into the salespeople. But yet every leader, if you ask them if the performance of their salespeople is a reflection of how they're coached, and they all say yes. Then you say, okay, well, what are you doing for your leaders? And they can't tell you. They say, well, I don't know. I mean, there's always this inherent trap everybody falls into. They need to know more about what their leaders are doing and not doing, and less about what their salespeople are doing and not doing. So I know my leaders are doing, and I know how well they're doing it, the salespeople will follow. I mean, the military forever says, hey, there's no such thing as bad troops. We only have bad leaders.
Now, is that a corporate culture problem, or is this a lack of leadership? It can't be lack of knowledge that leadership's important and kind of walking the walk's important.
That question it's probably not as easy. And I think part of it is the latter of those. It's lack of knowledge. Because if you were to say to the leaders, which we have, and in our research shows this a lot, but leaders have no idea what to do to get more performance from the people on their teams. Does that make sense?
So they think just yell louder?
Well, ironically, of course, it's typically, I hope it's not yelling, but what they'll do is, and you'll hear this quite a bit, and we hear it within larger organizations a lot. Well, we're missing numbers, or we're behind on numbers, or we need to hit better numbers. And so you'll hear senior leaders say things like, well, go coach your people up. Go coach them more. Well, here's the irony of that. If a manager is a bad coach, if I'm a frontline manager and I'm a bad coach, and you're telling me to go spend more time with my people, our research shows they're actually more likely to inhibit performance than enhance performance.
And that's because
so you go tell somebody who's bad to coach more, and you're actually having the opposite effect you want it to have.
Well, because they are coaching more and they're not good. So
Exactly. I'm doing right. And I'm probably just making salespeople upset and frustrated. And back to your point, their idea of coaching more is getting tighter with the numbers. Show me more of your numbers. Show me more of your data, salesperson. Tell me the deals you're working on. Well, guess what? If that's what you're leaning on, we show in our research that's, well, as a matter of fact, the number one thing salespeople complain about with their managers is all they want to do is talk about numbers.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Coach the Coach, helping business coaches deliver more impact in less time. Featuring today's guest, co-author of The Coaching Effect, Mr. Bill Eckstrom. If you're a business coach and want to help more people make more money and own your backyard, go to brxteam.com. Bill, Stone Payton with Business Radio X here. I've been listening into your conversation with Lee. I have 103 questions, but I'd love to ask 2 in the time that we have available.
Good. I look forward to it, Stone.
So one for me, and just to give you some context, I am not out in the marketplace needing to sell my services as a coach. I do find myself wearing that hat here at the Business Radio X Network. Counting us, we have 9 studios. We'd like to have a lot more. And I am in the role of trying to coach, I think that's the right word, our other 8 studio partners in how to help their clients help people and make money and live into our mission in these various markets that they're trying to serve. My first question with regard to, though, marketing a coaching practice, how does the whole sales and marketing thing work for a guy like you? And I ask because it seems like it could get a little crowded out there and a little difficult to do the selling part before you even get to start practicing your craft.
Good. That's a good question, Stone. And I think one primary thing is we're not, people don't hire us, say, to coach an executive. That's not who we are. That's not what we do. If an organization comes forward and says, hey, I want all my managers to know how to become an effective high-growth coach, that's when we would get the phone call. That's who we go after. So we got to go after organizational teams, not an executive who calls up and says, hey, I want to be a better coach. I'm the president of a company. Can you guys help me? We can, but that's really not our hands-on primary service, if that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense, and it suggests to me that you've chosen to be very distinctive in the market in that regard. You've chosen this niche. You've decided you're going to get really good at, and maybe by now you are, really good at serving organizations who have that set of challenges and are looking for people with specialized knowledge and expertise in meeting those challenges. So, congratulations to you for meeting that challenge. So maybe if I were to ever have to go outside to market, or maybe some of our coach listeners, maybe part of the lesson to them is to try to, well, I'll ask you, I won't put words in your mouth. Would you maybe counsel them to rifle in on a, I guess for lack of a better term, niche? I know my business partner, Lee, he often says, niches make riches.
I think there's 2 approaches. That to be within those niches is certainly wise, and right now, for example, with my coach, I can't imagine my world without her right now. And I think organizations or coaches that want to do that, absolutely, they can niche certain markets. They can niche in sales. They can niche in executive leadership. They can niche in the president CEO market. There's a lot of different places they can go with it. So I think it always makes sense to start off within a niche and then only expand when you become great at something within that. And then maybe you can determine whether your product and service could be used more globally. Like we've discovered that within our organization. Everything started in sales leadership, and it was some presidents and CEOs that said, hey, you guys, come on. All this applies to everybody in the leadership role. It doesn't apply to just my sales team. Well, we believe that anyway, but that's where we started. And it was the marketplace that asked us to expand. It wasn't a deliberate move on our behalf. You see what I'm saying? I
do see what you're saying, and I think I would much prefer, and it's probably just better mojo all the way around, if you do that and set things up through that deliberate set of behaviors so that the marketplace is asking you instead of you going out and shouting from the rooftops at the marketplace. So I like that. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I'll try to take that to heart.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I'll try to incorporate it if I ever find myself marketing to the outside, but I also wonder, there probably is some direct application for me learning what we do learn here, coaching internally and trying to help our people help their people. And then we may find things that, wow, yeah, this is helpful for another market. And if we can find a way to solve a set of problems, meet an unmet need, maybe we can help more people and make more money like that. So I'll take that to heart. Thank you for that.
Well, yeah, and if I may real quick, one of the things you may that tie into that we haven't covered yet, But it's important to know, because whether I'm a personal coach working with an executive, coaching a coach, there's really four primary, and this is what we see in our research, there's four primary things that coaches do that get the most performance. And one of the things that I know that you were leaning towards is relationship. That's the foundation of performance. And that's one of those things that, regardless of whether I'm working in a niche with a CEO or whether it's doing something like we do working throughout organizations on a broader scale, everything starts with relationships, and especially trust-based relationships. Because with that in place, none of the other stuff I do or you want to do as a coach is really going to be effective.
Wow. Well said. I have a feeling we're bumping up against what you're going to have to say about my next question. So I think we might get a chance to hear about the other three. You mentioned four. My next question was going to be about kind of what you and Lee started the conversation with in the beginning around measures. Here again, to give you a little context, in our world, media, specifically digital radio, you'll find people measuring or counting a whole lot of different things, views and listeners and website visits and popularity. And of course, Lee and I, we're getting a little long in the tooth and maybe a little cynical, but we're pretty quick to say, just because you can count something doesn't mean that it counts. And so our whole business model is even built on all that stuff. But my question, in fact, we call some of those metrics, we call them cosmetrics, as in cosmetic metrics.
Right.
But I'm wondering, as a coach, as a coachee, as an organization footing the bill for coaching, what are maybe some of the cosmetrics, or if we don't, it's not important that we identify those as much as it is, what are some things that we darn sure better be measuring?
Oh, wow. Arguably the most powerful question so far in this conversation. And this is where really it gets, organizations really get funky. I mean, again, I'm going to continually fall back on sales as an example just because we have so much data and research there. But most organizations track what salespeople do. They track where they go. They track the visits they make. They may track dials of the phone. We had one client say to us, we know when our salespeople stop for a Starbucks because we have GPSs in their cars. They tell you how many conversations they've had, what stage of the sales process they're in, their average selling cycle, their average revenue per sale, on and on and on. They just have all kinds of metrics and cosmetrics, to use your lingo. But if you ask them, okay, well, where were your managers last week? They would say, I think we're working with salespeople. Oh, you think? Well, yeah, I mean, some of them were in the field. Okay, what salespeople were they with? Well, I'd have to go back and look, and I'd have to review their expense reports. Here's my point of all this. They can't tell you where they were last week, let alone last month. The metrics they should be tracking, the metrics they should be understanding, simple things. Like what if an organization found out that their top performing managers spend an average 120 days in the field, but yet their bottom performing managers only spend 80 days in the field with salespeople? They would probably have, hey, you're going to have a minimum metric that we got to hold you accountable to, right?
Right.
What if they found out that the coaching quality of 80% of their managers was a C-, and the top 20% averaged an A-? They'd want to know what the difference is. If they want to understand metrics, how many times are those managers holding one-to-one meetings with their salespeople? Because that's what our research shows is what we call high growth activity. That's a key coaching metric. One-on-ones held. Another key metric and another key activity is career development plans. Are they doing career development plans, having career development conversations with the people on their team? Because that is another motivator. But they go and spend time with their people. Are they doing objective feedback? I mean, come on. How do we grow if we're not getting objective feedback from somebody, right?
Right.
I mean, everything beyond that then would just be a guess. But yet, less than 5% of coaches, before we get them, provide objective feedback. Think about that.
But how do they do objective feedback? Like, what are the metrics they're using to give feedback on?
Ooh, good question. It depends on what the job set is and the skills needed to be successful. So in sales, using that as an example again, it could be things like the ability of the salesperson to develop a trust relationship, the ability of the salesperson to ask good questions, the ability of the salesperson to identify needs, the ability of the salesperson to transition and put together a follow-up communication that summarizes all the next steps and actions, the ability of the person to do a logical sequential presentation that fulfills the prospect's needs or client's needs, the ability of that salesperson to articulate next steps and close, the ability of that salesperson to accurately document within a CRM.
So
those are all skills that a manager should be able to coach to and improve.
That's part of your service as you come in and then you help them develop these 14 points are the things you're going to be measured on. And then we come up with some sort of a criteria to go through, that you've done this or you've accomplished this or that.
Yeah, we don't develop the 14, whatever those skills are measuring are. I mean, we have general guidelines. What we do is we teach the coach how to get those. We teach the coach how to grade and analyze those. We teach the coach how to provide effective feedback. We teach the coach what is it you do and don't do that creates stronger trust-based relationships. We teach the coach how do I do an effective career development plan and conversation with the people on my team. And then we track the quantity of that work and the quality of that work.
Then how do you define the quality?
You're asking really good questions. Through the eyes of the people on the team. We call it our coaching effect survey, and it is quite literally measuring, which is also the title of our book, but it is measuring the effect through the eyes of the people on their team, which quite frankly is obviously the only way to truly to measure a coaching relationship is to go to those being coached.
So it's individual to the person, the individual that coach is coaching.
That is correct.
Now, let's talk about the book a little bit. How did the book come about?
I've never been asked that. Everybody has other questions, but I love that question. Organically, it was our colleagues and clients. I was fortunate enough to get asked to the TEDx stage, and following that, people would say, well, do you have a book? Clients would say, have you guys written a book on this stuff? People in education, gurus and gurettes in leadership had wanted to know why we hadn't put a book together yet. So that was the motivator, along with another bizarre story that maybe we'll get into sometime.
So now when you said, okay, we're going to put a book together, was it difficult for you to kind of compile your wisdom into this format, or was this something that just came easy to you?
I would be lying if I said it came easy. I think for my co-author, colleague, and close friend, Sarah, it's much easier. Now, finding the time to do it wasn't easy. She's just, I think, more equipped to write. She's a more concise writer. She's able to, it probably takes me twice as long to get through writing as it does her. But so in the midst of creating the book, we still have the business to run and client needs to meet and strategies to devise. But so it was a pain in the rear, quite frankly, but it was a labor of love.
But now that it's done, or towards the end of being done, is it something that you feel helped you kind of crystallize your thinking and articulate your message? Did it help in that regard, or did you already had this down?
Oh, no. What you said is so true. When you are forced to put all of your thoughts, all of your work in writing, it it makes it so much more concrete. It forces you to be succinct and articulate. It's an amazingly precise exercise, and it helped our business grow. It's helped in our strategies. It's helped in our marketing. There's no downside at all to what we've done.
So now, before we wrap, do you have any actionable pieces of advice for coaches out there that are just maybe getting into coaching, something that they could do that would smooth out their learning curve?
I would say, number one, do not take the relationships for granted, that everything begins there. And number two, and this came out of our research, this was probably arguably one of the things that surprised us the most within the research, is create some discomfort for yourself and for your people. But you can't do it without having a relationship first, because growth only occurs in a state of discomfort. So if all we do is use our relationship to keep things as is, you're not creating growth. You have to create some healthy discomfort, and for yourself as well as the people whom you're coaching, in order to continually grow.
So, but in order to create that tension and discomfort, you have to have a high level of trust, which is what you've mentioned a lot earlier on.
Yep, or you're just a jerk.
Right. And you won't get listened to. I mean...
Yeah.
Well,
and I've heard people use worse language, but...
Now, Bill, if somebody wanted to learn more, get a hold of your book, or have a more substantive conversation with you and your team, what's the website?
The website is EcSellInstitute.com, which is EcSell. So it's Eck and then Sell.institute.com. The name of the book is The Coaching Effect. And The Coaching Effect hits the bookshelves on April 2nd. It's been ordered. You can pre-order now on Amazon, and the book will be shipped on April 2nd. We just got notice from the warehouse that 4,000 books have been shipped to the distributors, so we're really, really excited for that. But April 2nd is when it's going to hopefully fly off the shelves.
Good stuff. Well, Bill Eckstrom, thank you so much for sharing your story today. Once again, the website is EcSellInstitute.com, EcSellinstitute.com. Thank you again, Bill, for sharing your story.
Gentlemen, thank you. Make it a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. This is Lee Cantor for Stone Payton. We will see you all next time on Coach the Coach Radio.